phrase, human heart, always seeking to return that from which it came from. Good Anglican theology believes that everybody, every child, everybody, every human being is born good. No one comes out of the womb damaged or sins of the father being, because of his dad, right? Or, his grandfather, he's going to be a real... No, don't buy that. It's not good theology. God creates us all in God's image. Every human being born into the world is born good and precious in the eyes of the good Lord. It's amazing how we get up on our high horse of judge, jury, and executioner when we see human beings act less than godly, right? So here we are again on this journey, Lenten journey. The bottom line is every day is a journey, and every day, by virtue of our baptism, we should be dying to that old self. That self that's not godly, that self that is selfish, that is arrogant, that is narcissistic, that is greedy, that is all that stuff. And we die to that daily so that we can be born anew. Sir, I want to see Jesus. I want to see Jesus. I've been seeing Jesus my entire life. The older I get, I don't just want to see him. I've seen him. Growing up a preacher's kid, right, Sharon Farr, we've seen Jesus all our life. I don't want to see him anymore. I want to know him. I want to know him deeply. Because that's where true joy is found, right? To know Christ deeply. To know he is with me no matter what. To know everything I have in this life. It's not because I've done anything special. I had the blessing of being born into a family, right? I could have been born in Papua New Guinea. I'm not picking on Papua New Guinea. That's not fair, right? It sounds like I am, but okay, forget Papua New Guinea. There are children in our fair country born into families where they don't have a fighting chance. The church, along with schools, along with the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts and these organizations we have in our culture, the Boys Club of America, the Girls Club, they still got that. Boys Club, Girls Club, they still have that, don't they? It was way bigger, when we were growing up, wasn't it? A lot of those groups have had their funding slashed, and it really is falling on the teachers and the preachers, which means you guys, the faith communities, to help raise these kids up. Not just to see Jesus, but to know him. So I thought I knew him. Son of an Episcopal priest. Man, I went to Sunday school. I went to every youth camp. Elijah, you and I, we would have been best buddies in high school. I was at every one of those JYCs. I was at every one of those HYCs. I was at every one of those 6 days. I could not get enough. So I thought I knew Christ. And then I get in my first parish. And let's just say the word dysfunctional doesn't do it justice. And I started turning into that ungodly person that I didn't like and I didn't recognize even at times. Sarn remembers the boys were way too young. David was born in 98. I was in that parish a full year before he came into the world, so he has no inkling. But Sarn does. the dysfunction and the projection and the transference and the countertransference and all those fancy words which us preachers and not just us, but therapists deal with, and teachers and coaches. But I was getting it. I was getting it like a fire hydrant. It was on. I started drinking 2 martinis, 2, not just 1, 2 martinis a night, just to chill out. I told you before, that's why I do not keep the little blue bottle with the Queen on it in my house anymore. That was my coping mechanism, and it was an old coping mechanism, and it still is if I'm not careful. So everybody in recovery here, keep working the steps, okay? Keep working your sobriety, keep working it, keep working it, keep working it. Boy, I was not in a very good place, and I went and I made a retreat, like I was wont to do back then, at a Jesuit retreat center in Wernersville, Pennsylvania. The irony wasn't lost on me. In Wernersville, Pennsylvania is one of the leading substance and sobriety clinics in America, the Caron Foundation. So some of you might know if you're from the East Coast. The Caron Foundation is like the Betty Ford of the East Coast. It's where a lot of people go for their substance abuse issues. Wernersville, Wernersvill. It's out of Reading, Pennsylvania. There's this beautiful Jesuit novitiate up on the hillside on 350 acres, overlooking the fields, and Reading is in the distance. And the Roman Catholics shut it down and moved their novices up to the Syracuse, New York area. But they left behind this beautiful building. We're talking the husband and wife, who were the main bank for this novitiate. She was childless, and she was Roman Catholic. He, if I remember, it's the Fitzpatrick family. Of course, it's the Fitzpatrick family on St. Patrick's Day weekend. He was the Episcopalian. They made their money in New York City a long time ago, and she was a papal duchess. Do you know what that is? Because of her largesse, we're talking money, Pope Pius the 11th, I think it is, who unfortunately gets labeled the Nazi Pope. Sorry, there's the Roman Catholics. 12th would come to this novitiate to bless the novices, and Mrs. Fitzpatrick would have an audience with the Pope because she was Mrs. Fitzpatrick. And in fact, the story goes, in the refectory, which is a fancy term for people who study theology and eat their cornflakes in the same room, on the wall was an original Titian. Does anybody know under the age of 20? David, I'm looking at you. You're taking computer science at UW. Do you know who Titian is? No. He's one of the great Italian Renaissance master painters. They had a Titian of the La Pietà, where Jesus has just been taken down off the cross, and he's being held in his mother's arms, laid out, he's dead, and the angels are there, and it was hanging on the wall for 100 years, and some guy from the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City was at the Jesuit Center on retreat, and he's eating his cornflakes, and he keeps looking at this painting, and looking at it, and he goes, oh my, I think that's an original. Sure enough, he got permission to take it down off the wall. They took it back to New York, they carbon dated it, and of course, yeah, it was an original Titian. Like a $20 million painting was hanging on the wall in the cafeteria. Mrs. Fitzpatrick got on a boat and went and had an audience with Mussolini. True story. Got out her checkbook and said, I want that fountain. I want that wrought iron gate. I want that, armoire. She brought them all back. If you are ever in eastern Pennsylvania, north of Philly, near Reading, right in the middle, but on this far eastern side of the state, it's a rectangular state, and you're near Wernersville, you have got to go up the hill and go through the big gates that she bought from Mussolini and just walk into this mini Vatican. The chapel inside, the walls are stained glass, and then the high altar, there's a baldacchino like in St. Peter's, Rome, the 4-pillar post thing that hangs over the main high altar. And there's all this gold leaf behind it and above it. I'm telling you, the Catholics do a lot of things lousy, but they do not do that churchy, visual, cultural, gold leafy, statuary thing. They do that really well. Just saying. So here I am. I pull up in my car, in a bad place, and God has a sense of humor. So the last place you would think I would be going to get myself right would be a place where they don't make you speak for 8 days. I know what you're thinking. Tom Horn, quiet for 8 days. They took mercy on me because it was a silent, directed retreat. 1 hour a day, I had an audience with my spiritual director, who, again, in God's sense of humor, was a Baptist preacher from Australia. Now, nobody can be a spiritual director at this Jesuit center unless you have made the 30-day spiritual exercises of Ignatius of Loyola. That is no small thing. But you happen to be Baptist. Before I leave my little church in Huntington, Pennsylvania, a woman in the parish comes up and she sticks a book in my hand and she shoves it literally in my chest and says, "You need to take this with you on the retreat." I'm like, "Look, I don't want to read books. I just want to go and be silent. I gotta, I've told you this story before, but there may be some people here who have not heard the name of the book. So for instance, do you remember the people who remember me telling you about the book that this woman, Lois, I'll go on the record, I'll give you her whole name. She is a saint of God. And the last I heard from my former family in Pennsylvania is that she is now suffering from dementia. I knew her when her mind was clear as a razor beam. A razor beam? I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but maybe that's why I'm telling the story again. Do you know the name of the book she put in my hands and said, "Go read this"? Yes, see that? It was called 9 o'clock in the morning. There it is. Dennis Bennett. In a nutshell, Dennis Bennett is an English bloke. He's in heaven. He was the one-time rector of St. Mark's in Van Nuys, California. And he had a born-again experience in a layperson's living room on a Wednesday night. And he was in the pulpit on Sunday, and he told his parish what happened to him. And he freaked out his Episcopal congregation because Dennis Bennett said he was born again. He knew he was done in that parish because he saw, where's my senior ward? Jason, do not get up and walk out in the middle of what I'm about to say. As he was telling his congregation what happened to him in that living room, I mean, he was hoping to go in, say grace, pat his little parishioners on the head and say, "Okay, I got to run home now." And it was the family of the home that said, "No, we need you to kneel, and we're going to pray for you." He said he went to his knees thinking, "Yeah, what can they do? They can't, I'm the priest here, right?" They put a Holy Spirit whammy on Dennis Bennett that blew his socks off. He told that to the congregation. His senior warden got up in the middle and went, "Huh!" And you could tell, out the door, stormed, and probably if he had cell phones back in 1975, he was on the phone to the bishop saying, "Get this crazy priest out of here. He just had some weird stuff happen to him, and it's not very Episcopalian." And it's not. So this is what I'm getting at. If you're a cradle Episcopalian, join the club. We are the ones in most need of knowing Christ. I mean that not in a judging way. I mean it because I just see so many. In fact, I'm going to lump everybody in here who came out of the womb and was in the church and has been in the church ever since. We have the most baggage. All you people who have come to faith in your 20s and in your 30s, and maybe even 2 weeks ago, I'm jealous. You're usually more hungry to know Christ than us churchy people who've been doing it for 50 years. And that's where I was. So I go into this novitiate basically thinking I was pretty fancy. I knew all the answers. My dad's a preacher. I've got a doctorate. I've done this, I've done that. I traveled the world. I mean, look at me now. Yeah, look at me now. Drinking 2 martinis a night, being a lousy husband, a lousy dad, and probably safe to say a lousy parishioner. I went through that door of that novitiate, and I pulled that book out of my backpack that Lois Cruikshank gave me. And I'm telling you what, because at the end of that book, Dennis Bennett says, look it, he says, what happened to me isn't special. It can happen to you. And if you just say this prayer with me, he says in the back of the book, just say it to God. You can put your own twist on it and just get ready. So, it's like St. Patrick's Day, literally, the year 2000. I was wide awake. I was a broken man. And I just slumped to my knees, and it was a cry for help. Lord, I don't even know if you're out there. If you're out there, man, I'm hurting. And something's got to give here. Because I had enough of a sensibility that I knew what I was doing and how I was being. It was leading down a really bad slope. And I did not want to keep going down that slope. And I just basically cried out something to the effect, Lord, I need you now more than ever. Please come into my heart and make me anew. Create in me a clean heart. I say the Psalm 51 today, that line, create in me a clean heart, O Lord. When I pick up that gospel with my back to you before I turn and I come down the nave, that's what I say. That's what I say. I've been saying before I preach since St. Patrick's Day, because I never said that before what happened to me. I say, create in me a clean heart, O Lord. And what happened next can only be described as something I will never, ever be able to explain. Eugene Peterson, in the John passage today, he really does a better job than the translation that we were given about a seed falling into the earth and dying. He says this, unless a grain of wheat is buried in the ground, dead to the world, it is never any more than a grain of wheat. But if it is buried, it sprouts and reproduces itself many times over. In the same way, anyone who holds on to life, just as it destroys that life, but if you let it go, reckless in your love, you'll have it forever, real and eternal. That's what happened to me. God's reckless love grabbed me, hook, line, and sinker. And the next morning, when I walked through the door of my counseling, my spiritual direction time with the Baptist guy, he knew right away something was different. My wife knew right away when I got home something was different. Again, the kids were too young. Lois Cruikshank was in the sacristy on altar guild, and she took one look at me, and tears ran down her cheeks. She knew God got me. I looked at Lois and I said, it's all your fault. So this weekend, the night of our gospel, with the Greeks coming to see Jesus. And the Greeks get picked on because, they're a heady bunch. They live in their philosophy. And remember, Paul says that the Christ crucified is foolishness to the Greeks. It's foolishness to their wisdom. The Baptist guy the next morning said, what has happened to you is you, knowing God up here, has dropped 18 inches to right there. And he looked at me and he said, happy birthday. This is the beginning of the rest of your life. Now listen to me and listen to me carefully. I have to die to that false self of mine every single day. I am a six-pack and a bottle of Bombay Sapphire away from going to AA. That's the truth. Every day I have to die to that false self that says, you're not this, Tom, and you're not that, and you're not this, and you're not that, and they won't like you, and they don't this, and they're going. That's not coming from God. And when Brene Brown, and I know you're reading the book, and if you're not, some good soul here bought 20 copies, and there's about 8 left, and he bought them, or she bought them, because it's not paperback, and it is $16 with shipping, and not everybody can do that, and it's no shame in that, but if you still need a copy, before you leave today, knock on the front office door, and just say to the money counter people, bean counter people, the treasurers who do their fine work, counting the money and keeping track of everything, I'm here to pick up Brene's book, and all you have to do is take a left, go through Ann Brown's office, and there's a stack of them on top of the filing cabinet. Just take it and go home and read it. And I don't care if anybody's looking at you. What is she doing? Taking a book? No, I'm taking a book. What does she say in chapter 3? She's not even halfway through her fine reading on what it means to brave the wilderness. She's saying the same thing that I've been saying. What we got in America right now is a spiritual crisis of the highest order. It's the same crisis that infected and afflicted Jeremiah when Jeremiah was walking this earth. It's the same crisis that afflicted and infected in Jesus' time, and it's the same right now. Spiritual crisis. And here's the rub. Only us dying to our old self, the self that says to the cousin in my family, because he voted for Trump, I can't speak to him, and vice versa. He can't speak to me. Only dying to that old self and say, wait a minute. You're my cousin. Or fill in the blank for you. Your father, your mother, your grandparents, your brother, your best friend. That old self wants you, wants me, and my cousin to be at enmity. When that breaks God's heart, and what Brene is saying, we got to lay that down. Eric Kirtland, your Boy Scout Eagle Honor Court ceremony yesterday did this preacher and his heart a lot of good. And what it reminded me, as I sat there and I listened to the Scout Oath and heard the people talk about you and your friend Jeff, it reminded me, as I said to you, everything great about America. Everybody in that room at Journey Church in Camas, there to support Eric and his buddy Jeff, along with his mom and his grandparents. Everything in that Eagle Scout Court of Honor reminded me of the importance of connecting with people in this great country of ours who might not agree with me on everything. Whether it's politics, whether it's whatever. Brene has spent over 15 years and over 200,000 pieces of data to boil it down to this world and this nation of ours, unless we begin to build bridges with people who are different from us and who might have voted differently from us, we are in a world hurt. Renewal is the only way we can get there. I'm not going to go into the list of things that you can do, whether it's at this church or at another church. But if you're not doing things that get you renewed on a daily basis, rule of life. If you don't know what a rule of life is, you can Google it, and you can see it has sustained saints with a capital S and a small s from St. Patrick up to the modern day. Do I have it all sussed out? I do not. Do I still get stressed out? Yes, I do. Do I still have my wife look at me after 2 beers and get that look? Yeah, I do. And I ask God, okay, get me back to my true self. Renew in me and create in me a clean heart. As you young people grow up, if you learn that before it took me 30 years, 30 years to know Christ, to really know that He died for me and He loves me every hair of my head, even when that's the greatest news that I have ever heard in my life. And I'm not blaming my mom and dad. I'm not blaming my Sunday school teachers. I blame Lois Cruikshank. I blame Lois Cruikshank for putting the book 9 o'clock in the morning in my backpack. And I told her, and I'll tell her now, and maybe she's in heaven and she's listening to these words. I want to thank her. I want to thank her. Because when I say I want to see Jesus, Lois says, how bad do you want to see Him? How bad do you want to know Christ? Do you want to just be on the surface? You know what that looks like. I'm good at that. We've done that. I'm going to write a book on that. Or do you want to go deep? You want to go deep? There are prayer teams every church service, early and this one, in that corner, that will pray for your concerns, no matter what. All you got to do is open yourself up. Christ will never force Himself on you. But be ready. If you do, open yourself up for the joy, the renewal, the love. And here it is. The ability in a world which increasingly goes into ghettos and polar opposites and balkanization. All right. So this is serious. And I'm not always going to say it, but I'm going to say it. Our children are watching how we, as adults in the United States of America, are navigating what's going to happen tonight on 60 Minutes. And our children are going to ask questions. If they're that savvy, right? And if not, if they're on Xbox or playing Fortnite, they won't have a clue. That was a shout out to my boys. That damn game Fortnite, that is the devil. No, I'm just joking. Could be a lot worse. Okay, I'll just leave it at that. It's the devil because now it's an app on their phone. Derek and Celine, Aaron, Trey, Fortnite is an app on the phone. You knew, yeah, Elijah knows what I'm talking about. So we're just a little side note there, okay? Everything in moderation. But if they watch tonight and they ask questions tonight, how we respond to the present state of affairs while the children are watching us is very, very important. I'm asking us all to refrain from what we have been seeing as the modus operandi of our nation when it comes to these issues that are afflicting our political system. You know how Tom Warren is trying to make sense of it? I've watched 2 Winston Churchill movies because I'm looking for a leader, and I'm looking for character, and I'm looking for backbone, and I'm not looking for a saint. God knows Winston Churchill was not a saint. He liked to drink too much. He liked to swear too much. He treated women less than appropriately. I'm just saying. But my goodness, there was something about that man, and here it is, and something about the British people. Here it is. The British people rose above and saw their common humanity as Britons against a scourge the world has never seen, and I pray we will never see. And there are some people sitting here who were in London, were on that island, either as a teenager or as a child, while the Luftwaffe was dropping bombs on their heads. And it's the English people who laid down all their differences, whether you're from Liverpool or from London, whether you're a Scotsman or a Welshman, whether you're an Irishman or a Midlands person, whether you went to Oxford or you didn't go to school, you sweep streets. The British people said, we're not going to play that. We're not going to cave in. We're going to be Brits. We're going to be Americans. We're going to make this country, and we're going to repel any scourge, any evil that would threaten our shores and threaten to divide us and threaten to kill us and threaten to put us into oblivion. The English people, along with, of course, good, self-differentiated leadership, made it so that they beat the Nazis. They beat them. There's some people here who fought in Europe, who were in those forests in Belgium and in those holes. They died on those beaches. 9,000 American boys your age landed in those beaches. Omaha Beach, Juneau, Sword. They laid it down. And we get on Facebook, and we get on Twitter, and we bash, and we get sucked into that terrible soup of nastiness, and it takes us away from who we are. God's people first, and Americans second. And we get what we're going to get on 60 Minutes tonight. Are you kidding me? I'm even taking up time in the pulpit, but I got to because I'm a preacher. And I got to somehow get us to understand we are better than this. And now the children are coming in, and I'm going to wrap it up. Because they'll be like, what is he going on about, Daddy? Oh, man. Okay, let us pray. Heavenly Father, we do lift up our country. We lift every man and woman in church, in synagogue, and in mosque across our great country this morning, worshiping you, the God and Father of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of our mothers, Leah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. Open our eyes to your hand at work in the world about us. Deliver us from the presumption of coming to this table for solace only and not for strength, for pardon only and not for renewal. And help us all, Lord, to know your Son Jesus in a deeper, healthier, more life-giving way, which means we see you, Jesus, in our neighbor and also in our enemy. Amen. Standing as your